Discipline begins where excuses end. Discipline is not born from strength, it is born from order. When life turns into chaos, a person begins to look not for motivation, but for form. They are tired of eternal impulses, of leaps, of promises to themselves that don't survive the morning. It seems to them that they are weak, but in fact, they simply haven't built a support. Strength without structure crumbles, like water without a shore. And the harder a person tries to pull themselves together, the more they burn out, because they are pressuring themselves instead of creating order around them. If you feel that you lack discipline, don't start with willpower. Start with the external. Get up, clean the space where you live, put your desk, clothes, screen, and thoughts in order. This is not a ritual of cleanliness. It is a way to return clarity to yourself. When everything around is chaotic, consciousness cannot maintain focus. The brain feels disorder as a threat. Any trifle that is out of place reminds you that you are not in control of your life. And until the external world is ordered, the internal one will not become calm. Every time you bring order to at least one thing, you restore self-respect. This is a small act of strength. When you build even a minimal structure, energy begins to flow. The body senses that you have taken responsibility and it stops resisting. Start with the simple. Don't build an ideal schedule. Just decide that the morning belongs to you. Let there be one stable ritual in it. A cup of water, silence, breathing, order around. If you hold the morning, the day submits. If the morning is chaotic, the day is doomed to struggle. Order is not boredom, it is the breath of stability. When everything has a place, a sense of security appears. Security gives energy. Energy gives birth to focus. Focus creates action. Action returns confidence. Everything else is noise. Do not start discipline with slogans. Start with respect, with not breaking promises to yourself. Do not make vows that you know you will not keep. Let it be less, but stable. Even a small step taken every day strengthens you more than 100 promises broken the next day. Stop waiting for inspiration to tidy up. Action itself creates energy. When you clean the table, turn on the light, open the window, it's not about cleaning, but about returning authority. The body reads, "I am acting." The brain begins to believe that you are capable. From this moment, chaos loses its power. The world loves clarity. When everything is in its place inside and out, anxiety disappears. You stop losing energy on unnecessary decisions. You no longer need to choose between now and later. Everything is simple. There is rhythm, there is form, there is you. If you feel you cannot start, begin with one small action that returns your sense of control. This can be order on your phone, a made bed, a cup of water in the morning. This is not a triviality, it is a foundation. Discipline does not begin with great goals. It begins with respect for the small things. Do not try to burn out chaos with effort. It can only be ordered with attention. When you begin to see that everything in life is subject to rhythm, the desire to break yourself disappears. You start to just move. Discipline is not pressure, but a form of inner peace. And one day you notice that everything has become simpler. You no longer need to force yourself. No need to gather yourself, motivate, or coax. There is rhythm. There is order. There is calmness. This is the beginning of discipline, when structure becomes your nature. People rarely understand that the lack of discipline is not laziness, but pain. Under chaos, resistance is almost always hidden, and behind resistance, fatigue. The one who cannot pull themselves together is often not weak-willed, but overloaded. They have lived too long in a regime of pressure, expectations, and comparison. And now any attempt to force themselves causes internal protest. The body no longer believes in promises because it has heard, "I'll start tomorrow" too many times, and too often seen how tomorrow never comes. To become disciplined, you must first stop breaking yourself. Violence does not create stability. It creates burnout. Every time you tell yourself, "I must," you strengthen the internal overseer. And the overseer always provokes rebellion in a person. When we live under pressure, the psyche looks for any opportunity to escape. It sabotages, postpones, loses interest, freezes. And the person calls this procrastination, although in reality it is a defense mechanism. True discipline is built not on shouting, but on trust. When you stop threatening yourself and start talking to yourself like someone you want to support, energy appears inside, not out of fear, but out of respect. If you want to become disciplined, stop blaming yourself. First, restore contact with the one who is tired inside. Sit down, be silent, feel your body. Allow yourself not to rush. When you stop running, the brain stops defending itself. A space appears where order can be built. Start with softness. You don't need to do everything at once. One small step is enough. Stable, simple, without drama. People burn out not from volume, but from harshness towards themselves. Make the action easy, but mandatory. Let it be a short warm-up in the morning, 3 minutes of breathing, a small list of 2 tasks that you perform every day. The main thing is not quantity, but rhythm. Rhythm is the cure for internal chaos. It restores the psyche's sense of predictability. When the day has a form, the body relaxes. It stops looking for stimuli, stops rushing. Discipline is born from this relaxation. Stop building your life on emotions. Emotions come and go. Want to, don't want to, inspired, drained, believe, doubt. If you depend on this, you will always be in a loop. Act not from feeling, but from choice. Let choice become a form of peace. When internal protest appears, don't fight. Just reduce the pressure. Resistance is not an enemy, it is a signal. It says that you demand too much of yourself. Try to take a step more gently, but take it. If you can't walk a kilometer, walk 5 minutes. The main thing is not to lose movement. Remember, laziness is not the absence of strength, but the absence of meaning. When you don't see the why, the body doesn't move. Therefore, before demanding from yourself, remind yourself what all this is for. Discipline does not work without meaning. It should not be a punishment. It should be a choice that makes you alive. Gradually, you will notice that everything becomes calmer. Resistance leaves because the pressure disappears. You are no longer fighting with yourself. You are simply doing. Without slogans, without heroism, without self-flagellation. And then discipline ceases to be a heavy word. It becomes an internal support. It is no longer a struggle, but a form of respect. When you are not forcing, but leading. Not demanding, but guiding. Not pressuring, but supporting. Every time you show softness instead of criticism, discipline strengthens. Because at that moment, you learn to trust yourself. And trust is the soil on which will grows. Thus, step by step, chaos disappears, and a feeling appears that you can, not because someone inspired you, but because it has become quiet inside. When there is silence inside, order comes on its own. Within every person live 3 forces: the inner child, the adult, and the parent. In some, the child leads, seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, running from order. In others, the parent dominates, pressuring, forcing, blaming, and the adult sleeps. True discipline begins when the adult wakes up. They do not shout, do not demand, do not punish. They simply preside. They know that order is not a prison, but care. To become disciplined, you need to learn to be a parent to yourself, but not a cruel one, but a wise one. Not one who demands perfection, but one who supports when you fall. People lose their will not because they are weak, but because there is no figure inside them that can withstand the tension. When there is no inner parent, a person constantly looks for external control, a boss, a partner, a system, a goal. But this is always unreliable. Discipline that relies on the external collapses at the first crisis. The parent inside is the one who says calmly, "We will do this," without threats, without blame, without hysterics, only with confidence. And this confidence is not from strength, but from presence. It is the voice that does not require feelings to act. It simply knows that it is necessary. To awaken this part of yourself, you need to stop treating discipline as punishment. It is not so that you become better. It is so that you become more reliable. When you are reliable to yourself, anxiety disappears. When there is no anxiety, energy appears. And when there is energy, acting is easy. Try to listen to how you talk to yourself when you fail. Criticism often sounds there, "Didn't do it again," always putting things off, "You're weak." This intonation kills the will. The body does not react to aggression, it defends itself. For the will to turn on, the voice inside must become soft. Try to speak differently. We will start small. I am here, I won't abandon you. These words are not about weakness, they are about maturity. Every time you show softness towards yourself, trust is formed inside. When there is trust, the body is ready to obey. It does not resist because it knows it will not be forced. This is internal discipline, not a struggle, but agreement. Many try to become disciplined through control, but control is fear. It exhausts. When everything is subordinate to must, life loses its breath. Discipline without compassion turns into a prison. True discipline lives only where there is humanity. Look at it differently. Discipline is a form of care. When you get up on time, you are not torturing yourself, you are giving your body stability. When you eat on time, you are not restricting, but supporting. When you work in rhythm, you are not squeezing, but creating. Every ritual is a manifestation of self-love, expressed in action. The compassionate parent does not give indulgences, but also does not punish. They simply stand nearby and say, "We are going." They know that the child will get tired, will resist, will sometimes want to give up, but they do not leave. This is discipline, constant presence without threats. If you want to become such a parent to yourself, stop demanding a result. Think not about what you want to achieve, but about how you want to live. Result creates anxiety and rhythm creates order. Gradually you will feel how the internal tone changes. Where a verdict used to sound, support will appear, and will is born from this support. Not a flash, but stable internal warmth. When the voice inside becomes even, the body obeys willingly. The inner parent is not perfect. They don't always know the right way, but they are always nearby. They do not burn out, do not leave, do not lose you. They repeat, "We will cope." And this is the most important thing you can say to yourself if you want to become disciplined. Discipline is not about control. It is about maturity, about the ability to take care of yourself not according to mood, but according to decision. When there is a parent inside, life becomes predictable. And predictability is not boredom, but peace. Peace is energy freed from struggle. It is this energy that becomes the strength upon which will rests. When a calm parent lives within you, you no longer need to look for motivation, because you have already become the one who keeps their word. The body is the foundation of discipline. It stores the memory of every violation of rhythm, every overload, every postponed action. When the body is tired, willpower does not work. When the nervous system is exhausted, no plans work. Therefore, if you want to become disciplined, start not with the mind, but with the body. The brain is not the source of strength, but its conductor. Energy is born in the body, in breathing, in movement, in rest. When the body does not receive care, it retaliates with apathy. Every "I can't" often means not laziness, but fatigue. When there is no rhythm of sleep, nutrition, and breathing, the body is unable to maintain attention. And without attention, there is neither order nor focus. Discipline does not begin with control. It begins with care. The one who knows how to listen to their body knows how to manage their energy. And the one who manages energy no longer needs motivation. Therefore, if you want to become disciplined, first learn to rest. True rest is not inaction, but restoring contact with the body. Turn off the noise. Slow down. Sit down. Feel your back, your breath, the warmth in your palms. Everything you are looking for in your thoughts is already in your body. When attention returns to the body, thoughts stop rushing. Clarity arises. Start noticing how your physical states affect your behavior. After lack of sleep, chaos. After prolonged hunger, irritation. After an hour of scrolling the screen, emptiness. This is not weakness of character. It is an energy failure. Restore the base, and the will wake up on its own. Sleep is not a luxury. It is fuel for awareness. Without sleep, the brain does not distinguish between goal and threat. It spends energy on anxiety. If you want to be collected, build your evening. Let the last minutes before bed be quiet. The body needs to know that everything is under control. Movement is not sport, but a way to regain authority. When the body moves, the brain feels the rhythm. Rhythm is discipline in its purest form. Therefore, do not look for complex systems. Just walk every day. Let steps become your meditation. Nutrition is a form of respect for energy. When you eat in chaos, you feed chaos. When you eat consciously, even simple food becomes a source of calmness. Discipline is not a refusal, but a ritual of balance. If you want to change your life, start with a bodily routine. Wake up at the same time, eat at the same time, go to sleep at the same time. Repetition is the language in which the body feels secure. Security is the foundation of discipline. Everything that is repeated strengthens the nervous system. When the rhythm is stable, the need to pull yourself together disappears. You simply live in the flow. This is maturity, when action no longer requires effort. Stop fighting with fatigue. Listen to it. It shows where you have violated the rhythm. Do not fight. Restore. This is not weakness. This is strategy. When the body trusts you again, it gives energy willingly. Discipline is not constant must. It is the natural consequence of health, rhythm, and breathing. When the body is calm, the psyche obeys. When the psyche obeys, life is built. And then you begin to feel that effort is no longer needed. You don't force yourself to get up. You just get up. You don't coax yourself to work. You just continue. Everything becomes natural. And in this naturalness, a strength appears that never burns out. For discipline to become your nature, it needs a system. Not random efforts, not emotional surges, but a simple, reliable structure that holds even when there is no mood. In a world where everyone is looking for motivation, it is the system that makes a person free. It replaces chaos with decision, habit, and clarity. Start small. Don't build an ideal day. It doesn't exist. Build a predictable one. Let your routine be like breathing, uniform, but alive. When every action has a place and time, the psyche stops being anxious. It no longer needs to choose, argue, or postpone. It knows now is the time for this, then for that. If you want to become disciplined, remove unnecessary decisions. Decide once. For example, you work in the morning, or you walk every evening, or you write before bed. When the decision is made, the brain is freed from internal dialogue. The hardest thing is not doing, but choosing. Therefore, choose once and for all. Don't complicate things. The system is not a list of 20 rules, but a few anchors that hold your life. One morning ritual, one evening ritual, one way to close the day. This is enough for energy to flow in the right direction. When building a structure, don't try to be perfect. The ideal kills the process. Make your order flexible. Let it withstand life, not break under pressure. True discipline is not about rigidity, but about rhythm. Create a space where chaos is impossible. You should have a place for work, a place for rest, a place for silence, even if it's one corner, one desk, 1 minute. The body must understand where focus begins and where it ends. This is a simple but powerful form of internal respect. Gradually, your day will become a system that works without effort. You will stop pulling yourself together. You will simply enter the rhythm like breathing. When the structure is built in, action does not require effort. This is the mature form of discipline, not doing through force but doing naturally. For the system to take root, remove extremes. Don't demand perfection from yourself. Don't punish for failures. The main thing is to return. Returning is discipline. One missed day means nothing if you return without guilt. Learn to trust repetition. Repetition does not make life boring. It makes it stable. People are afraid of routine because they confuse it with meaninglessness. But routine is a support. It frees up energy for what is important. Until you build basic processes, creativity cannot manifest. The system does not kill freedom, it makes it possible. Without structure, any inspiration drowns in chaos. When the day has a rhythm, there is time for spontaneity. When everything is in its place, you can finally relax. If you want to build discipline forever, stop waiting for a high. Start doing because it is already your identity. Not I am trying to be disciplined, but I live in order. When discipline becomes a part of your image, it does not require reminders. And then one day you notice that you no longer look for willpower. It just is. You don't think about how to gather yourself. You don't look for a mood. The day flows on its own. Everything is in its place. And in this simplicity lives true freedom, calm, mature, silent. Discipline is not a tool, but a state of consciousness. When you are no longer chasing inspiration, not looking for external control, not pressuring yourself with internal judgments, but simply living in order, a quiet strength is born inside. It is not like motivation. Motivation pushes, discipline holds. True maturity begins where you stop fluctuating between must and don't want. You simply do, not out of fear, not out of habit, but out of respect. This respect is not loud. It does not require recognition. It is like breathing, always present, even when you are not thinking about it. When life becomes predictable, you feel peace. Not because everything is under control, but because you no longer need to prove anything. You are no longer fighting with yourself. Every action becomes confirmation that you are in your place. Discipline is a mature form of love. It does not promise ease. It gives confidence. It does not make you iron. It makes you alive, but stable. There is no fear in it, because it is not imposed. There is no pride in it, because it is not demonstrated. This is an internal form of silence from which stable energy is born. The world is chaotic. It constantly pulls attention, but the one who has a rhythm does not lose themselves. The internal structure becomes like a core that everything leans on. Without discipline, even wisdom turns into noise. Without order, even strength becomes destruction. When you are in rhythm, a feeling of freedom appears. You don't need to decide anew every day. You don't need to coax yourself. Everything flows naturally. The body knows when to get up. Consciousness knows when to work. The soul knows when to be silent. This is harmony, not external, but internal. Sometimes discipline requires refusal, from excessive promises, from fuss, from the desire to prove. These are not refusals out of fear, but out of clarity. You simply understand that order is more precious than chaos, silence is more precious than noise, depth is more precious than speed. And then life becomes different. You stop looking for balance because it is already there. Not ideal, not smooth, but alive. Everything goes its own way. And this is not indifference, this is maturity. Every day when you follow your rhythm, you confirm to the world that you are ready to live consciously. This does not require strength, only constancy. Everything great is born from repetition. If you want to feel true freedom, don't look for inspiration. Build order. Let every day be simple, but clear. Let everything you do be the result of a decision and not a mood. And when someone asks how you manage to be collected, you will simply smile. Because the secret is simple. You stopped looking for motivation and started respecting the rhythm. If you recognized yourself in these words, write in the comments, "Я выбираю порядок," I choose order. Let this become your internal contract. Without promises, without slogans, without loud words, just a quiet decision to live not from chaos, but from awareness. Because true order begins not with external control, but with internal silence. From this silence, will is born. From will, peace. And from peace, the freedom that no longer needs to be sought. The text below has been translated into English without any changes to the content or structure and is presented in small, separated paragraphs. Self-distrust does not appear suddenly. It grows slowly, from childhood, from glances, from words, from those moments when it seemed to you that you were not as you should be. When you did something sincerely and in response heard, "This is not enough." When joy had to be earned and recognition was always at arm's length. Then a crack forms inside, not in character, but in trust. The world becomes a place where you have to prove that you have the right to be. A child who was not believed grows up into an adult who does not believe themselves. They learn to evaluate themselves through the eyes of others. Any decision seems like a mistake, any action insufficient. They become a hostage to others' expectations. And the more they try to conform, the further they move away from themselves, because every right distances them from the inner truth. Thus, a deep habit of doubt is formed. Doubt becomes a way of life. It hides even in trifles, in intonation, in gait, in the words "maybe" and "I'm not sure." Inside lives a constant feeling that you must ask permission before acting. Once, this was a way to survive. When you were little, dependent on approval, when punishment seemed like a threat to existence, doubt saved you. It kept you from conflict, from pain, from unnecessary risk. But what once saved you now holds you back. To regain faith in yourself, you need to see how it was lost. Not to blame parents, not to look for the guilty, but to acknowledge, "Then I couldn't do otherwise." Then doubt was safer. But now you can do it differently. See how often you seek confirmation. How many decisions you postpone because you are afraid of making a mistake. How many ideas you have not realized because you wanted to be sure in advance. But confidence does not precede action. It appears after. When you start doing, despite the doubt, a new support appears inside. This is not sudden faith, but a quiet feeling. I can. Even if I make a mistake, I won't be destroyed. Even if it doesn't work out, I will endure. This is how trust returns. It too is not loud. It is like breathing. Stop looking for yourself in the mirror of others' eyes. There is no truth about you in them. All that others see are their reflections, their fears, their ideas of what is right. True confidence does not need witnesses. It grows from silence when you stop explaining and start listening. Listen to yourself without criticism. When the thought "I can't" appears, don't argue, just ask, whose phrase is this? Often it's not your voice. It is the echo of old voices spoken long ago. But you have grown up. You are no longer the child who needs approval to be. Every time you choose yourself, even in a trifle, doubt loses power. When you say no where you used to agree, when you allow yourself to make a mistake without self-destruction, you regain trust. Faith in yourself does not come from achievements, it comes from honesty. When you admit, I am afraid, but I still go. When you don't hide vulnerability, but carry it calmly. Because mature confidence is not about being unshakable, but about not running away from yourself. If you want to start believing in yourself, stop demanding perfection from yourself. Perfection is a form of fear. There is no life in it. Faith lives in the imperfect, because there is breathing, movement, and space for mistakes there. And one day you wake up and notice that everything has become quieter. You can still doubt, but doubt no longer paralyzes. It is simply present nearby, like an old acquaintance, and you go further. Because now you have what you didn't have before, an inner voice you can trust. In every person lives an inner voice that does not fall silent. It can sound soft, but more often, cold and sharp. It says, you didn't do enough. You could have done better. You made a mistake again. This voice is called the inner critic, but in reality it is not just criticism. It is a memory of other people's voices, once spoken with authority. You were not born with self-hatred. It was instilled in you drop by drop, through comparison, through expectations, through devaluation. When you were told, don't stand out, be smarter, look how others do it, you learned to look at yourself through the eyes of an observer who is always dissatisfied. And now this observer lives inside. They do not rest. They watch every movement, every word, every manifestation of life. It seems necessary because it helps you to be better. But in reality, it does not develop. It burns out. Constant self-criticism does not make you stronger. It makes you more anxious. It paralyzes any attempt to act. After all, if it's still not good enough, why start? When you live under this internal overseer for a long time, a new habit is formed. Doubt. It becomes the background. Even if you did everything right, a whisper sounds deep down. What if it's wrong? This whisper destroys faith because it does not allow you to feel completion. You are always somewhere in the middle of the journey, never reaching peace. To restore confidence, you need to stop listening to the critic as truth. They are not you. They are just a voice from the past. Parents, teachers, society, and the culture of success live in them. They grew out of the fear of being rejected. But today you can hear them and not submit. Every time the critic says, you can't, try to answer gently, I will try anyway. Don't prove, don't argue, just act. Doubt does not disappear from arguments, it disappears from experience. When the body sees that action is possible even with fear, the critic loses power. The inner critic feeds on attention. The more you listen to them, the stronger they become. Therefore, shift your attention. Notice not what didn't work out, but what did. Even if the step was small, it is movement. The brain remembers confirmations. Gradually, it begins to believe that you can not only analyze but also live. Shame is another of its shadows. Shame makes you feel as if something is wrong with you. It whispers, you are not smart enough. You are not worthy. You don't deserve it. This whisper paralyzes, but its strength is only in secrecy. When you look at it directly, it melts. Shame does not disappear immediately. But when you start talking about it, even to yourself, it loses control. Name it. Acknowledge, I feel shame. Just say it without judgment. At that moment, you regain your power, because you are no longer hiding. Stop striving for perfection. Perfectionism is a form of fear, veiled as ambition. You will not become more confident if you bring everything to an ideal. Confidence appears when you allow yourself to be alive, to make mistakes, to learn, to change. When the inner critic is silent, another voice appears. It is not loud, not aggressive. It simply says, let's try. This is the adult's voice. It does not promise success, but promises presence. It does not demand an ideal, but supports movement. This is the basis of self-esteem, trusting yourself, not evaluating yourself. If you want to believe in yourself, stop measuring yourself by other people's standards. Everything built on comparison inevitably collapses. No one can be confident if their value depends on external opinion every day. Gradually start talking to yourself gently, not as with an enemy, but as with a person who is trying. This simple change of intonation creates a miracle. The body begins to relax. The nervous system stops living in expectation of punishment. And where fear leaves, energy appears. And at some point, you will hear silence. Not because the critic disappeared, but because their words ceased to be important. They can speak, but now you have another center inside, calm, mature, confident. And from there, only one thing sounds. I am worthy anyway. Self-sabotage is one of the quietest, yet most destructive manifestations of inner distrust. It does not look like open weakness. It masquerades as logic, fatigue, procrastination, not the time. I'll think about it later. It says, I'm just not ready. But behind these words always hides one thing, fear. Not the fear of failure, as it seems, the fear of your own success. The brain is afraid not of change, but of uncertainty. When you start to grow, old connections inside break, old self-images collapse, and a person accustomed to doubt does not know who they are without it. Confidence is scary because it is new. You want to be strong, but a part of you knows that strength will deprive you of excuses. Strength will force you to face the world without protection. Self-sabotage is an attempt to preserve familiar pain. It is familiar, it is safe, everything is predictable in it. When you suffer, you feel alive, but you are not obliged to act. This is the paradox. Internal chaos seems safer than peace, because peace requires responsibility. Many are afraid to believe in themselves, not because they can't, but because they don't know what to do with that belief. After all, faith obliges. When you start to see your strength, excuses disappear, and then only the choice remains to live. Without the role of a victim, without drama, without self-pity. This is scary, because the habit of suffering is deeply woven into identity. To break free from this loop, you need to notice how you yourself set traps for yourself, how you take a step forward and immediately roll back, how you start something new and find a reason to stop. These relapses are not about weakness. They are a subconscious way to maintain the old security. When you want to become confident but constantly lose the rhythm, it is not a lack of discipline. It is an internal conflict. One part of you yearns for growth. The other is afraid of losing the old life, afraid that success will change relationships, that confidence will lead to loneliness, that strength will cause envy. And until this fear is named, it controls you. To stop sabotaging yourself, you need to admit, I am afraid of my strength. Not because it is bad, but because it is foreign. You were not taught to accept it. Since childhood, you were told, be modest, don't stick out, think of others. Therefore, every time you start to express yourself, guilt is triggered, and this guilt extinguishes the movement. Stop dimming your light so as not to blind anyone. The people who need it will find glasses, the rest will turn away, and that's okay. Confidence is not pleasant to everyone. It exposes the weakness of others. Therefore, if you want to grow, be prepared to lose comfort. It is incompatible with strength. When you notice that you are retreating again, don't scold yourself. Just stop and ask, what am I trying to preserve? The answer can be unexpected. Sometimes you preserve not fear, but loyalty. Loyalty to parents who lived modestly and did not believe that more was possible. Loyalty to partners who are afraid of change. Loyalty to past versions of yourself who didn't know they could. Strength is always a betrayal of old. weakness. But this is the only betrayal that leads to honesty. You are not obliged to be who people are used to seeing you as. Your right is to change. Stop choosing calmness if it costs you self-respect. Doubt often looks like caution, but self-rejection is hidden behind it. Faith in yourself begins where you choose risk, not insane risk, but internal. The risk of remaining yourself, even if the world does not approve. Every time you take a step forward, despite the fear, the brain rewrites the map of reality. It sees that movement is safe, that growth does not destroy but expands, that confidence does not make you lonely but makes you whole. You are not obliged to feel ready. It won't come. Readiness only comes after the action. Therefore, stop waiting for the moment when you believe in yourself. Start acting now, and faith will come as a consequence. Self-sabotage disappears not from willpower, but from honesty. When you stop playing I don't know how and admit, I'm just afraid. This admission is not weakness, it is maturity, because only the one who sees fear can walk through it. And one day you notice that doubt is still around, but it no longer rules. It has become a whisper that does not interfere with walking. And inside where there was fear before, now lives calmness. Calmness from the fact that you finally stopped hiding from your own strength. Confidence is not born in the head, it lives in the body. Doubt, too. It is not a thought, but a bodily reaction. When you are told believe in yourself, you cannot simply decide to do it, because doubt is not in the realm of logic. It is recorded in the nervous system. It lives in tense shoulders, in constricted breathing, in the throat where the word won't come out, in the stomach that clenches before a choice. Every time you doubt, the body repeats an old story. Memories of the fear of being ridiculed live in it, of the moment you were interrupted, when you were not heard, when your spontaneity was punished. These micro-traumas accumulate into physical memory. And now, even when no one is around, the body reacts as if the danger still exists. To believe in yourself, you must first restore the body's sense of safety. Without this, any work on self-esteem turns into theory. You cannot feel confident if your body is contracted, because confidence is the physiology of peace. Try to notice how you sit when you talk about yourself. Where is the tension? Where does the breathing stop? These places are the map of your distrust. They cannot be convinced, only relaxed. Awareness begins not with the thought, I am confident, but with a simple breath. Breathe slowly. Breathe deeper than usual. Feel how the body begins to remember the rhythm. Even breathing is a form of confidence. It tells the brain there is no danger. When breathing returns, thoughts become clearer. When clarity comes, strength appears. Doubt is always frozen energy. When the body does not move, the mind starts spinning in circles. Thoughts become obsessive, analysis endless, and the more you think, the tighter you contract. Therefore, confidence returns not through reflection, but through movement. Move, even if you don't feel like it. A walk, stretching, a short exercise, not for benefit, but for contact. When the body feels that you are with it, it stops being anxious. You begin to feel stability that requires no proof. Ground yourself. Feel your feet, the surface beneath them. Feel your weight. Realize that you are standing. Grounding is not esotericism, but a way to return the body's sense of presence. When you feel the ground, the brain stops looking for danger. Confidence is not the thought, I can do it. It is the feeling, I am here. In moments of anxiety, do not argue with yourself. Just return to the body. Take a breath, become aware of your back, relax your shoulders. This simple action restores control. Because when you are in your body, the critic loses power. They live in the head, and the body lives in the present. Doubt feeds on speed. The faster the thoughts, the stronger the anxiety. Slowing down is the opposite of doubt. When you act slowly, attention returns to the present. You begin to see details, to feel that life is happening here and now. Self-confidence is not pressure or loudness. It is a soft, grounded energy when you are not rushing but also not freezing. It is movement from the center. The center is where the breathing is even. When you restore contact with the body, the feeling of internal rupture disappears. You no longer need to convince yourself. Everything becomes simple. I am, I feel, I do. This is faith in yourself, not as an idea, but as a state. If you want to regain confidence, start with a bodily rhythm. Wake up at the same time, breathe deeper, eat slower. Look at the world not through the eyes of anxiety, but through the eyes of presence. When the body is stable, consciousness stops rushing. Sometimes it is enough to simply be in silence, not to meditate, not to analyze, just to feel. In this silence, doubt dissolves, not because you have become different, but because you have stopped running away from yourself. And then confidence becomes not an effort, but breathing. It does not require words, it simply is, in your gait, in your voice, in your gestures. There is no struggle within it. There is peace, and this peace is the most reliable form of faith in yourself. Faith in yourself is not a sudden epiphany, not a flash of inspiration, and not a phrase from a book. It is the return of the inner parent, the one whom many never had, the one who speaks not out of fear or criticism, but out of confidence. I am here, I will cope, I am with you. Until this voice awakens, a person lives on external fuel. They need others' evaluations, support, approval, but true confidence begins when you stop looking for support outside and become a support for yourself. Long ago in childhood, there was a moment when you did something with enthusiasm and someone said, "Not like that." This "not like that" destroyed the connection between spontaneity and safety. And now, when you want to act, that same voice sounds inside. It is not yours, but it has become your internal parent. Only this is not the parent who supports, but the one who criticizes. Therefore, an adult grows not only through goals, but also through re-educating this voice. If you want to regain confidence, start talking to yourself in a new way. Not in the language of criticism, but in the language of responsibility and care. When you fall, don't blame, but pick yourself up. When you make a mistake, don't judge, but explain. When you are afraid, don't demand courage, but simply stay nearby. Confidence is born not from strength, but from presence. To be an inner parent means to create a space where you cannot be afraid of your own mistakes. In a world where everything is measured by result, it is hard to believe that the process makes sense, but it is the process that makes you alive. A parent is not someone who praises for victory, but someone who does not leave after defeat. Every day you can choose who to listen to. The internal judge who looks for proof of your guilt, or the internal mentor who knows that everything is part of the path. At first, this choice is conscious, then automatic, and when the inner voice becomes soft, panic disappears. The brain stops perceiving mistakes as a threat, and then stability appears, which feels like confidence. To cultivate this part, you need to stop waiting for someone else to believe in you. No one will do this completely, because no one feels your pain like you do. Faith in yourself is not a request to the world. It is your personal obligation. It is a form of maturity in which you become your own adult. Do not look for confidence in motivation. Motivation is noise. Faith is silence. It is a state in which you do not argue with yourself. You simply know that you can, even if you don't prove it, even if it doesn't work out. This knowledge is not from logic, it is from internal respect. When you become a parent to yourself, the dependence on praise disappears. Praise becomes pleasant, but not necessary. Mistakes cease to be a catastrophe. A feeling appears inside. Everything is under control, even if I am not perfect. Start small. In the morning, don't scold yourself for fatigue. Thank yourself for getting up. If something didn't work out, don't blame, but analyze calmly. Treat yourself as you would treat a child you love. Do not promise them ease, but be there when it is hard. Gradually, a different tone will appear in you, a voice in which there is no anxiety. It simply says, keep going. And it is this voice that is the foundation of confidence. It does not need loudness because its strength is in constancy. True faith in yourself is not about always feeling right, but about not disappearing when you make a mistake. When you stay with yourself, even in a moment of weakness, this is maturity. And one day you will understand, it is no longer empty inside you. Where fear used to sound, now lives a quiet firmness. Where there was guilt, respect. Where there was doubt, confidence. Not as an emotion, but as a foundation. And it no longer requires confirmation. Quiet confidence is not a state of ecstasy, not a feeling of strength, but inner peace in which there is no need to prove anything. It comes when you stop fighting with yourself, when you no longer need to convince the world that you are worthy, when the striving for perfection disappears and a simple knowledge remains, I am, and that is enough. Faith in yourself is not created by effort. It grows from acceptance, from acknowledging your vulnerability, weakness, fear, imperfection, and that none of this makes you worse. As long as you fight your shadows, you cannot be confident. Confidence lives where you stop running away. When you admit that you can make mistakes and do not lose self-respect, firmness appears. It is not loud. It does not need expression. It is felt in your gait, in your breathing, in the pauses between your words. This is mature confidence, in which there is no fuss. The world is accustomed to understanding confidence as a demonstration. To be confident means to speak loudly, look decisive, and not doubt. But true confidence is the opposite. It is silent clarity. There is no desire to be right in it. There is the calmness of being yourself. When this calmness appears inside, comparison disappears. Others no longer become the measure. You begin to see them not as competitors, but as people, and in this vision, envy disappears. After all, a confident person does not compete, they preside. Self-esteem becomes stable when you stop depending on emotions. There are days when everything works out and days when everything collapses, but you remain the same. Your dignity does not fluctuate with success. It is not subject to circumstances. This is internal support. To reach this point, you need to walk through the pain of doubt. Not bypass it, not jump over it, walk through it. Doubt is needed not to stop you, but to cleanse. It checks where you are standing on non-essential foundations. And when you see this, you stop being afraid of doubts. They become not an enemy, but an instrument of clarity. Quiet confidence is the maturity of the soul. When you are not looking for inspiration, not demanding to be a hero, not promising the impossible. When you simply preside, completely, sincerely, without masks. You begin to feel that confidence is not a reward for success, but a consequence of honesty. Honesty with yourself. When you stop pretending that everything is under control and admit that life is unpredictable, but you still choose to be in it. Not to hide, not to disappear, but to be. This is true faith in yourself, without illusions, without loud words, without the need to look strong. Every time you choose silence instead of panic, awareness instead of haste, truth instead of approval, you strengthen this confidence. It becomes not an instrument, but the essence. And then you notice the voice of doubt is still sounding somewhere in the background, but it no longer controls you. It has become weaker, like the echo of an old fear. And over it sounds something else, calm, mature, firm. I know who I am. If you recognized yourself in these words, write in the comments, "Я выбираю доверие," I choose trust. Let this become your internal promise. Not to seek approval, not to fight yourself, not to prove that you are worthy, just to trust. Because confidence does not come when you become perfect. It comes when you stop being a stranger to yourself, and then everything that previously seemed impossible becomes natural. Here's a small prediction for watching until the end. Your fatigue will turn into clarity. You only need to take the first step.